Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Ron Kettleson, and I'm president of the Sharon Historical Society. We're really thrilled to have Ted Short here tonight to present his presentation on the Palatine House, celebrating 280 years. So, Ted, take it away.
Well, good evening. And yeah, this is the first time program. So I have a repertoire of old programs, and over here in Sharon, I think people have seen every one. So when Ron asked me to come over here, I put together this, and it was timely. It's 280 years for the Palatine House Museum, and we just got a brand new roof. So I want everybody to come see it. And I don't know, it's funny, a lot of people have not been there. It's in Schoharie. It's in the village limits of Schoharie. It's right behind motor vehicles up on the hill, behind the county building and the courthouse. But many people have just not been there. I confess, until I took over as director, I had not been inside. And so it's only open, it's traditionally open seasonally. It's a nonprofit organization, of course. It's open Memorial Day to Columbus Day on weekends only and by appointment. And so a lot of people haven't seen it. Many people have driven by and looked at it, but haven't been inside. And they should go inside because it's really kind of a treat. So can I advance this one or here? Oh, right there. Okay. And so, but a lot of people, when you start talking about the Palatine House, a lot of people don't really know, what you're talking about. So I'll give a little bit of background on the Palatines. As a matter of fact, I had one person one day call me at the Palatine House when I was staffing and saying, I really can't find you. And they were telling me, I said, well, where are you? They were driven every street in the village of Palatine Bridge, 35 miles away. And they see the word Palatine and it's unique and they think it's just one place. And so a lot of people really don't know. The Palatines were Germans. At that time, no, there really was not a Germany. It's a whole messed up conglomeration of principalities and there's dukes and counts and that. You got Prussia, Bavaria, Hesse, Darmstadt. There's a whole bunch of different provinces at the time. So the people aren't really, they all speak the same language, but they come from really different countries. So it's kind of a mess. This map, if you look, the one on the right or the one on the left is a map of Germany. That's kind of a modern day map. It gives you the provinces. And you can see the little orange box there on the lower left. That's the part of Germany where all these Germans come from. The Rhine River runs through there. The box on the right is a blow up of that. And the places in yellow are actually the Palatinate. It's not just one square, rectangular, whatever country. It's a little piece here, a piece there, different countries in between. Some of them are outlying, but that's the Palatinate. And they call that, they're independent of the Holy Roman Empire. The whole area around them is part of the Holy Roman Empire, and they're independent of it. And so anyhow, it kind of gives you, most of the people who wound up coming to America come from right about in the center there. The cities of Heidelberg, Mannheim, Mainz, and Frankfurt, and the areas around, but most of them along the Rhine. There's even a few families from the Upper Rhine. The Dillenbecks or the Tillepaws today are actually Swiss, I think, and they came from way up. And so there were a few, it was quite a mix of people.
What year would that map be?
This represents the early 1700s. Oh. And something I really didn't know a lot about until recently. I'd heard a lot about the Germans and they were fleeing war. And when you really get into it, a lot of people call this the First World War. It's too complicated. I could spend a whole hour talking on this slide alone, and I won't. But anyhow, it's kind of a mixed up thing that takes the Holy Roman Empire and puts it on the side of the Protestants. And they're basically fighting the Catholics. and it goes on for 14 years. Eventually, it's going to spread to America. Ironically, some of the Germans who are fleeing this from 1708, 1709 will wind up in America. 300 of them will be drafted from the Hudson Valley to go to Canada to fight in the same war 10 years later. And so it's really, it's a huge thing. And a lot of Europe is caught up in it. Now, this will give you a good idea of it. Now, again, not to spend too much time on this, but basically, Charles II of Spain was the last of the line of the Spanish Habsburgs. Spain was a very powerful country. He died in 1700 with no heirs. And the thing with Europe at that time, everybody's interrelated. And so anyhow, it's decided, he decides to leave everything he has to his grandson or his cousin's son, who is also happens to be the grandson of King Louis XIV of France. Louis is a Bourbon. In the eyes of the Holy Roman Empire, it throws way too much power in the hands of the Bourbons, because Spain, which has always been Habsburg, is now going to be Bourbon, and the thing just takes off. Portugal, one of the countries, I think it's either Savoy or Portugal, actually changes sides in the middle, and but it really becomes quite a war. And so these people in the Palatinate are kind of caught up. The first 2 years of it, 1702, 1703, are fought heavily over this area. And then King Louis XIV throws his army in there, an army of occupation, very similar to what's going on in Ukraine right now with the Russians. And what's happening to some of those Russian civilians, the murder, the rape, taking over their houses, moving in with them. It's happening to a number of Germans in the Rhine Valley. So, and then on top of that, most of that was 1702, 1703. Meanwhile, the Germans are getting drafted into different armies. Some are being drafted into one side, some on the other. And then comes the Great Frost, they call it, the winter of 1708, 1709. Scientists, I think, are still wondering what exactly went wrong, but a cold wind came out of Siberia at a time when it normally wouldn't, kind of like that blast we had a week or two. All of a sudden a blast came down, it's 15 below zero, and then the next day it's 40. That wasn't too uncommon for January in Europe. But the thing is, it came back in February and stayed, to the point where they said birds that, that came out, got hungry and decided to come out and fly, were freezing in the midair and dropping to the ground frozen. The Rhine froze, part of the English Channel froze. And what happened to a lot of these people, they're not just simple farmers. A lot of them are vine dressers in vineyards. They run orchards. The vineyards are killed. The frost goes 4 feet deep, kills the vineyards, kills the orchards. On top of the devastation of the war being fought over it, these people get hammered. And it's a real bad year for them. And then comes the Golden Book. And again, these people are not looking for religious freedom, not like the Pilgrims. They've got plenty of religious freedom. They're mostly looking to get out of poverty, and they've got no future. It's interesting to look at the group of people that are coming here. It's not young couples looking for a new start. At least one of the Germans that comes to America is 80 years old, and just looking to get out of there. And so anyhow, Joshua Kokertal came from Württemberg. He was a Lutheran minister, and he had 3 small parishes in Germany. He went to England about 1705, which is how he learned what was going on in England. He came back, and a small number of German refugees earlier had gone to England and were sent to North Carolina, where there's lots of pine trees. It's called the Tar Heel State. It's perfect for making tar and that. But a small number of Germans have been sent there successfully. And he comes back, puts out this pamphlet, and it makes the rounds. Most people have it read to them. They know that it was meant to be read aloud in groups. And most people probably had it read to them because the cover on it had Queen Anne and like gold lettering. And most people refer to it as the Golden Book, which meant they probably saw the cover, but never saw the actual book. They had, they just heard it. Telling how wonderful it is in America, and Queen Anne might give free transportation and might give free land. It's speculative, but people really, they soak this up. And they all of a sudden there's refugees on the Rhine. Many of them go to the dukes of their kingdoms or whoever's the head of their principality and ask for permission. And much of this has survived, interestingly enough, so that you can hear their testimonies, because they're saying, well, why do you want to leave? And they're saying, well, this is why, and for the most part, it's poverty. They got, again, eventually it becomes so bad, so many people are leaving, they actually try to block the Rhine and stop people from going to the Netherlands, where everybody's going to Rotterdam. And then they're looking for free transportation to England from there, because that's what the book said. So, and the camps, overall, I think about 15,000 Germans, not all, someone went back, but at least 13,000 were in the camps around London. It's a problem. At first, people are delighted to have them there. The English have been told they're victims of the evil French Catholics. They hate the Catholics and they're happy to take them in. They find out that 29% are Catholic. They send them back. And anyhow, so these people are in camps, and in London, it's becoming a hardship. They're famous for their homeless population anyhow. Just watch A Christmas Carol. And that's always been London. And now the homeless people are starving to death because the charity is going to the Germans. And some of the Germans are taking jobs in the area, and the wages are dropping because they'll work for any wage. And it's starting to cause a problem. And they're a burden to feed. They're taking up, in the winter, they took up all these warehouses. In the summer, they're taking up all these camps. They send about 1,200 to Ireland, and they come back. They're not going there. They don't want to be servants on somebody else's land. No, it doesn't work for them. They all come back to London. And so that's that story. So comes Governor Robert Hunter. The last governor of New York has died after only 5 months. And he's a Scottish officer. He's the aide-de-camp of the Duke of Marlborough. His name, I think, is John Churchill. I think he's Winston Churchill's ancestor. But the Duke of Marlborough is the British general on the continent in this war. So he's leaving the war to be appointed governor of New York. He's appointed September 9th, 1709, and he makes plans to take 10 shiploads of Germans with him, over 3,000. I think he originally was 3,200 Germans. And the idea is to make tar and pitch for the British Navy, which is something you don't think about, but England had destroyed its forests. Even the famous Sherwood Forest of Robin Hood's time is gone. Everything's gone to industry. It's gone for tar and pitch for the Navy. It's gone for firewood. Their forests are gone. All their tar and pitch comes from Denmark. Denmark doesn't particularly like them, sells to both sides when England's in a war, and they just doubled the price. And so the Navy really needs that tar and pitch. And so he's got an idea. They settled another small group of Germans in the Hudson Valley previously, and it worked out nicely. And they had already sent a small group to the Carolinas. Why not take them to New York with him? And so he outfits these ships, puts 3,200 people on the ships. They sit on the ships, I think, from December till February, where almost 500 die. Can you imagine wintering in London on a ship? Most of the children die, actually. Most of the kids under 5 die. And finally, they set off for America. And he settles them in camps. Generally, the Germans are not all Palatines. They're not all from the Palatinate. They're from all over, but they're generally referred to collectively as Palatines at this point. And he sets up 2 camps. On the east bank, he buys 6,000 acres from the Livingston Manor. Livingston profits from this nicely. He gets a contract to feed them. And meanwhile, they're going to be clearing his land and all that. So he makes out nicely. The west side is down where Saugerties is now. This would be Germantown today. The other one would be Saugerties. It's a piece of land that had previously been given to by by a previous governor, and the new governor that came in decided it was too extravagant and reneged on most of the land claims. However, it was okay with the Indians. So the government, the New York government's kind of holding on to this little piece of land and has had it for like 15, 20 years. They decided to put them on that side. And there are good, they figured the trees there are good for this project. And this story, some people say it's legend, some people doesn't say it doesn't happen, it didn't happen, it could have happened. It's kind of a fun story. The English requested that the Mohawks or the Iroquois send a few dignitaries to England to meet the Queen, Queen Anne, and it's kind of fun to think about it. I know some Mohawks. I can picture this story. It's like, no, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. No, well, I'm going to go to the ship for 3 months and go, no. So they can't get anybody to go. So finally they get these 4 guys who are kind of like somewhat notable in the tribe. They finally get 4 guys to agree to go. And so these go to England as the Mohawk Kings. And they have a great time. Their portraits are painted. They love the English beef. They're entertained. They're taken to Shakespeare and all that. But they may have seen the Germans. At the time they were arriving in London, the Germans were probably already going on the ships or on the ships. It would be like the British to show how powerful they are by saying, look, see how great the English crown is. We can extend mercy to people from other countries and all that. So they might very well have brought them to see the Germans. But the story is that has been handed down is that the Mohawks saw the condition they were in and said, come to Schoharie, we'll take care of you. And so anyhow, that's the story. It's kind of a neat story. And the promised land. The English actually did consider this as a place to put the Germans. And again, referring back to the previous extravagant land grants, there was a man named Bayard who had been given land by the previous governor in 1690s, Governor Fletcher. And basically he gave away the entire state of New York to about 30 people. I think one of the grants actually ran to the Pacific Ocean. And anyhow, the next governor, Lord Bellamont, comes in and says, no, and most of them are too extravagant. He just writes them all off. And a few close friends of his get to keep them, and they're smaller estates. Anyhow, Nicholas Bayard, he loses Schoharie. He had gotten I think a 10,000 acre grant or something in Schoharie, which he lost. And anyhow, they come back to him. They take the West Camp, one of those old grants, and they're thinking of Schoharie. They have another grant. It's okay. The Indians have already kind of sold off on it. The Mohawks are cool. They're very, very smart. And they go up to the English, they see what's going on. They say, what's going on? And they tell them, well, we're doing this in the land. They say, we want a deed. And so the English, that's a big deal. You got to get the lieutenant governor involved. He's the surveyor general. Lieutenant governor's got to take the field. It's got to be with the Indians. The survey is done. It's all done. They have the deed. They know where the boundaries are. And then the Mohawks hand it to them and say, give it to the new queen with our compliments. And so they give it to them. After all, they just wanted the title and the 3 free boundaries, and they wanted to know what was going on. And so anyhow, it's available. It's given up. It's hard to supply, and there's no pine trees. However, the Germans have heard about this. They've been told that this is where they're going when they're done toiling in the camps. The camps are only supposed to be a temporary thing. It's the promised land. In 1712, the whole thing, they've been there since 1710, the thing goes bust. It's the wrong kind of pines. They're not getting any tar or pitch. The Tories take over in London. They cut off all funding. The governor spends the next 10 years trying to get his money. I think he paid out of pocket for the passage over, which was like $2 million in today's money, which he doesn't get back and so on. So he just throws up his arms and says, fend for yourselves, stay close in case we need you. And so anyhow, about 50 families, small families, maybe 180 people, journey. They go to Schenectady. They send a delegation to Mohawks. The story is they actually showed the right respect which the English could never do, and said, will the great Mohawk mother take care of her German children? and the Mohawks take them in. They don't have enough food to get them through the winter, but they show them what roots to gather, help them build shelters. They get everybody through the winter, and the following spring, about 300 and 400 more Germans show up. And so that's that. I could go on a whole program on that, of course, too. The Germans wind up losing a lot of the land. The English colonial government doesn't want them there. Another story, but by the mid 1700s, this is by 1730, 1740, this is what the valley looks like. You can see way down on the bottom, the Indian village, Wilderhook, the Germans called it, is in the bend way down. And Vroman's land is off right under the number 2 is Vroman's Nose. That straight promontory there is what is, no, that's a mouse. But anyhow, yeah, this is and then looking north, number 3 is Middleburg, number 4 Hartmans, Dwarf, 5 is Schoharie, 6 Smithsdorf, 7 is where the old stone fort is up near the top and on the right. Number 8 is over by the Apple Barrel, Garlicksdorf, and way up at the top is Niskansdorf by Central Bridge. And that's pretty much the valley. The road to Albany goes off to the right. This road to Schenectady is off the top. And so that's the town in the century. When they first get together, they're about half and half, Lutheran and Calvinist, Dutch Reformed, or German Reformed it would be. And they all pretty much are served by the same ministers. They don't really distinguish that much. Today, we don't distinguish that much between them anymore either. And eventually they got basically organized. The Dutch Reformed Church was very well organized in Albany and Schenectady. They get established out by the old stone fort by the 1730s. You have a Dutch Reformed congregation where the fort is today. They build the first church there. They're a little ahead of the Lutherans. The Lutherans continue to be served by circuit riders. Most of us, surprised, come from Lunenburg, which is the Athens today, just north of Catskill. And imagine a minister coming out on horseback every, once a month at that distance. So that's where they're served from. By 1742, the Germans figured, the Lutherans figured they're prosperous enough. They can build a church. They can afford a full-time pastor, and they send to Germany. That's where all pastors come from. There's no seminaries in America. And they send to Germany, where a young man named Peter Nicholas Sommer is 34 years old, unmarried, working in an orphanage, educated, just waiting for a church to call him so he could be ordained. And so there he is. So there's his hometown. Not Württemberg, yeah, Hamburg. I'm sorry, I misspoke. It's Hamburg. And he was ordained immediately. There's a book on the family tree out called The Family That Missed the Boat, the Summers family, the family that missed the boat. And there's thousands upon thousands of members of the Summers family today. At least one is in the audience here tonight, I see. And anyhow, he gets to London. I was surprised. He jumps on a ship. He gets to London in 24 hours from Hamburg. That's a fast little mail packet, just in time to wave goodbye to the last ship to America. And it's October. They're not going to be sending a ship again until March. And as it turns out, that ship went down in a hurricane with everybody on board, and he would have died had he made it. And so he gets a ship in the early spring, late winter, early spring. He arrives here in May 1743 and holds his first church service. I think it's May 29th, 1743. And you can see, I like the contrast. There's the church. You can see where he's coming from. There's where he's going. And the frontier. So they build him this house, and it's going to have to serve as a church until they can build a house also. So he settles in down there. And he's also not only now the minister to Schoharie, but he's assigned as a circuit rider. So once a month he goes to up to Stone Arabia, where he will meet a young lady named Anna Maria Kaiser, and they'll be married the following year, May 1744. They were married. Yes.
Tell him how he gets there.
It's in the next slide.
That's the best part.
Thank you, though. Yeah, I think it's the next slide. It's one of those slides. They finally get the first church. And there's a quarry right up by the Palatine House. It's right at the foot of LaSalle Park. And that's where all the stone came from. And the people put their names in the stones the same as they did at the church at the old stone fort. And I don't have any images of that church, but this is pretty much what it looked like. It's an image of the Dutch church in Albany. Note the rooster on the steeple. They have a rooster in the old stone fort. And that, so
That rooster, if they have, that rooster?
I think they have this one. I know they have the one from the fort. I think they have this one too. I'm not, I didn't write it on the slide because I'm not 100% sure and I didn't have time to check it. But anyhow, there would be a rooster, the emblem of St. Peter on the top. And so that's what it looked like. By that time, it's kind of fun because I've served on church consistories. I know how it goes. For a couple of years, I'm like, we got to build that church. We got to build that church. We got to build that church. Meanwhile, he's married. First baby's here. We got to build that church. He's living in the church. And then they decide to build a log cabin church, a temporary structure. And they go through all of the rigmarole for that. And then they said, well, that's stupid. We're going to put a lot of money into this thing just to knock it down in 2 years so we can put up the stone church. And so finally, it takes 8 years. And they finally get the church, but then he's married and he has 4 children, and they're all in the parsonage, which is also the church, you know. So, and I've covered much of this already, and they would wind up with 8 children. They actually had 10 children. The Sommer family is famous for twins. There was a set of Sommer twins in school with me. My sister-in-law was married, or my brother-in-law was married to a girl whose father was a Sommer, and he had an identical twin brother. And they come from Canada, they come from California. The twins are still out there, big time. So they had 2 sets of twins. One set of twins didn't live to see a week. The other set would with the youngest, I think, or they were the youngest boys. It's kind of a neat contrast. Again, you can see the kitchen there and there, and the kitchen here on the left, kind of the same. I'll talk about that a little later, but yeah, the fireplace, it's a medieval German design. And some people are wondering when the state did the restoration, if they didn't go too far, if they did have that chimney. I think they probably did. This is pretty common for the early times. But you can see it's not like a traditional German fireplace. When you're standing on the hearth, you see the picture in the upper right there. You're standing on the hearth, you see the kitchen over your head, you just look up and that's what you see. You're looking straight up the chimney. It's just you build a fire on the floor under the chimney. And that's supposedly, I researched it. This goes back to the wet country, the Netherlands, which are the wettest country in Europe. They said a conventional English style chimney built on the ground, a house is going to settle, chimney is going to settle, and wet ground are going to settle a lot. Chances are the chimney is going to go one way and the house is going to go the other. And so on this one, the entire heating system, the entire chimney is built on the 2nd floor. The house moves, the chimney moves with it. And so that's the style. But, looking at some of the English fireplaces, it's somewhat primitive. No bread oven. You got to bake bread in an oven outdoors and so on. Many of the German communities had communal ovens in the middle of the communities and that, but that's the style of the kitchen. And here's my story about how he got there. So he became a circuit rider, first to Stone Arabia, where he met his wife. And then over the years, Little Falls, Hallsville, which is up by, had a different name then, it was up by Schoharie, Dorlock, Rhinebeck, Cobleskill, Claverack, and the old east to west camps down south of Catskill, down Saugerty and Germantown area. And the first 5 years, he could not afford a horse, so he walked. And you imagine walking to do church in Stone Arabia from Schoharie. and he finally did get a horse. There's one fun story. He finally did get a horse. Probably took him a while to learn to ride it. One day he was going to Stone Arabia, and the horse came back to Schoharie by itself. And they set out a search party for him. And they found a note at the crossing of the Schoharie Creek at Sloansville, what is now Sloansville. And the horse had thrown him and he couldn't catch it. He said he got tired of chasing him. He nailed a note to the tree, told him I'm walking to Stone Arabia. And so eventually he learned to stay on the horse, apparently. He became blind in 1768. This is the best part about doing this program today is I found out like 3 days ago that his journals, there's 25 years, he kept the journal for 25 years. And the Mormon Church has it on microfilm. I've never heard of it. I've never seen it. Chances are it's going to change my whole interpretation at the Palatine House. Basically, right now, I'm basing a lot of what I do there on one page of Reverend Hawley's 1752 diary. So I'm looking forward to 24 years. Also, they say at 1743 to 1767, that coincides with him going blind. The journals end when he goes blind, but he preaches for another 20 years. And he was blind all during the American Revolution. So
He lost him.
number of Native people baptized, 84 were baptized in Schoharie and baptized as Lutherans. And there are records of them sitting up in the galleries and stuff in the church on Sundays, and that's sometimes causing a ruckus, I think. But anyhow, so he was very active and had, a large local congregation. And they left in 1775 when the war began. And the war does come to Schoharie. So it starts at 1775 in Massachusetts. For a couple of years, there's not a whole lot going on. The militia's formed. They're called up periodically. They do guard duty in the Mohawk Valley and Albany and that. And a lot of people really don't even know whose side they're on yet. This area is mostly Patriot, but the southern part of the county was very much influenced by the English. There were more Tories. And then the Battle of the Flockey occurs in August of 1777. The Battle of Saratoga is going to be fought. All the forces are being drawn to that area. Most of our local militias up there, and a revolution, a Tory revolution, starts in the southern county with Adam Chrysler. And so there's only 5 Americans to guard the valley. They send Colonel John Harper of the Tryon County militia comes through. He goes on horseback to Schoharie, finds a troop of cavalry that's on its way to Saratoga, and basically turns them around and brings them to Schoharie, where they save the day. And it becomes the first cavalry charge in the history of the United States Army. But anyhow, it's the war finally comes to Schoharie. It's the first battle in Schoharie. What is it, Robin?
And what battle was that? You mentioned it before.
The Battle of the Flockey, this is.
Okay.
It's on here.
And
And so that's called the Battle of the Flockey. It's fought south of Middleburg in an area near Baux Island that is known as the Flockey. Die Flecken is what it was called. And anyhow, so now the war, not only is it the first cavalry charge in the history of the United States Army, but it is the war's come to Schoharie. Now they got to start taking sides. They know it's coming close. They start building forts. They know what's coming, and they begin building forts. These are completed in 1778. And the people, as I said, they got to start choosing up sides. A lot of people leave and go to Canada, and their descendants come back here doing genealogy today sometimes. So which side? We got Joseph Brand on the left and Tim Murphy on the right. The Reverend Summer was almost certainly a Tory. He probably would have remained loyal to the king and that, but he never took sides. He never publicly said so. He had property in the town of Sharon, which was seized. The Patriots took it, seized it, used the produce from that farm to take care of the Continental Army and that. And his 2 oldest boys who lived on that farm both went into the Continental Army, or into the British Army. One of them was an officer briefly in Butler's Rangers. So anyhow, so the family split down the middle. 2 of the kids fought on the British side. 2 of the daughters married loyalists. The other 2 daughters married Patriot soldiers. One of them an American officer. And the 2 youngest boys, the twins, late in the war, they've got to go in the military. They're living locally. They go in on the American side. So he's got 4 and 4. And then comes the big day, October 17th, 1780. The British forces, 800 of them, slip into the valley down by, they come in basically down Panther Kill Creek into the valley that way and destroy everything, just everything they can lay their hands on. It's a windy day to boot, and you can imagine a wind getting into a hay-filled barn in October, and so everything's devastated. They burned the church of the parsonage in Middleburg. They did not. They couldn't burn the old stone fort church of parsonage because it was protected by the fort, but they left the parsonage. Left it alone in Schoharie. They could have. There's some stories that say, "Oh, it was remote and they missed it." No, they didn't. It was. That's the heart of town. The church is the heart of town. The old church was up on the hill, and the people that wrote that didn't know the old church is there. But you had 84 Indians baptized there. You got the helpless blind minister living there with a wife. The two oldest boys are in the British service. And they don't burn it. The story is there were Mohawk Indians standing guard on it, making waving people off, saying leave it. And on the other hand, there were a few other houses that were spared in the valley because the people were Tories, and the Tories that were burning were their friends. The next day, the people from the forts went out and burned those houses themselves because they weren't going to get away with that. And had they known that the house was spared because Reverend Summer was a Tory, they might have burned that too. They probably wouldn't have burned their own church, but for whatever reason, it's spared. All this devastation, and the Lutheran church and the parsonage are still standing when it's over. And eventually the war ends. The old village of Dwarf comes back to life. People start to rebuild. The Hartmans Dwarf house at the old stone fort is one of the houses they rebuilt, and then it was later moved to the old stone fort. And then, well, you can see an early view of the house here. A new town comes, and Reverend Summer retires to a property in Sharon, and he died in 1795, and he and Anna Maria were buried there. You can see the sign there by his property. That marker is gone now. It's incorrect. There's a new marker in its place. It says First Lutheran Congregation, founded in 1745. First Lutheran Congregation's in the Schoharie Valley. He does serve these congregations, and he buys land there in 1752. But anyhow, that's up on Route 10. In the area. And years later, the couple were reinterred in St. Paul's Cemetery in Schoharie. There's a monument there to their memory. So all of a sudden, there's a new county, 1797, Schoharie County is created, shaved off Albany County and part of Tryon County. And Brunnendorf, which means fountain town, now gets a new name. It's Schoharie Courthouse. It's the county seat. And they build a new village down on the floodplain. Most of what's on that map was not there until the courthouse was built. The old village is at the bottom of the page on the hook on the road. That's Warner Hill. The town, actually, most of the old village runs off the map here and runs over to the rocks over at the old Schaefer homestead. The first courthouse is over there. It runs along the ridge behind the birches in Schoharie. And anyhow, so the whole village moves down around the courthouse. They build a new church and put it down there, knock down the old one. What's that?
What year is that map?
This is actually 1866. Earliest one I could find, but you can see by then all the people living on the map. Every house there is occupied by African Americans, except the parsonage, and that was sometimes used by them, as we'll see. So anyhow, the parsonage in 1797, they moved the parsonage. They picked it up and they moved it about 80 to 100 yards down by the spring. And at the same time, the church was disassembled. You'll notice some of the foundation stones in the Presbyterian church on Main Street have names on them. And that's because they took the stones out of that church, and many of which had the people's names on them, and took them and reused them for the foundation of the new brick church. So that dates to 1797. There's a tablet up there showing where the church was, and the house, as I said, it's right there at the top of the picture of the cluster of monuments. That's where the parsonage was. It was just an easy slide downhill. They moved houses all the time back then, and it probably was not a big deal for them to do it. Meanwhile, now they have a new church. They're going to build a new parsonage too down on Main Street. And what happened here? Anyhow, You can see two of the early views here, but they moved it down by the spring. Again, it's called Fountain Town. And, oh, that's fine. Okay. So it's called Fountain Town, and there's actually more than one spring. There's one up behind the birches. There's a pond up there that's spring fed, and so it's probably named for the numerous fountains. But this is the main spring. This was the water supply for Schoharie for a long time, and up until about 100 years ago, all the water for the fire hydrants and the water system for the fire department, or the village water, I should say, came from up in here. So it's still good water. It comes out of Becker's Cave, if anybody's a caver and knows a caver. So, and so the new house was put right on this now, very convenient for them, and it turns into rental property. So, and again, they moved it. This is a lot of controversy now. Not a lot of controversy. I'm wondering what the state did. You can see the doors in the middle there. I think maybe they might have moved it to the middle. They picked up the house, they moved it 100 yards, set it down on a new foundation. Foundation may have already been there from an older home. And then the door is changed, apparently. There's somebody who lived in the house, the last resident of that house is on our board. And she insisted the door in the middle was original and the state made a mistake moving the door to the side. And she said it was built as a church. Why would they have people enter through the kitchen of the house? And she's right. And this house is also has a striking resemblance to the German Dunkirk Church on the Civil War battlefield, Antietam battlefield, same building, a door in the middle, just like that. So it may have had the door in the middle from the beginning, and the state made a mistake or took liberties when they restored it, or the door may have been moved to the middle in 1797. And at that time, they added a center hall staircase. The Germans didn't have center hall staircases. So there were modifications made in 1797, becomes rental property. Again, it's now Schoharie Courthouse. The attorneys are flocking in like vultures on roadkill and moving in everywhere. And there's an attorney that rents an office. Man's Tavern was actually down where the Parrot House was, or there was a Man's Tavern there. And an attorney named Tiffany opens an office in Man's Tavern. And then the books all say he rented the old High Dutch Parsonage. Well, that would have to be this building. There is no other High Dutch Parsonage. So this apparently became rental property for an attorney, and it's kind of nice now. And then his younger brother, Isaac Hall Tiffany, just finished his apprenticing in Aaron Burr's law office in New York City, been rejected by Aaron Burr's daughter, Theodosia, who he was in love with. And anyhow, he comes up and joins his brother, and he becomes an attorney in Schoharie also. So you got two bachelor brothers in the rental property for at least a while here. And you can see the interior. They added a second fireplace at that time, one in the basement, and there'd originally only been the kitchen fireplace, and then the parlor one upstairs. You can see the bed off to the side. It's kind of a neat arrangement. And eventually, again, the slaves are freed in 1827. Everybody's built businesses and grand new houses down in the village of Schoharie. And the older houses basically become housing for the slaves. There's at least 5 more up on the hillside behind the birches, down towards the old courthouse. I went up there years ago and saw the foundation of one of them, Diane and Pete Enders at that time, but anyone knows them, they owned the property. And so anyhow, the Black community's on the hill. They eventually, the house, it becomes a sexton's house. It's owned by the church. It's used for different purposes. I've read that sometimes the Black congregation would have services there, sometimes funerals and so on. And eventually an African-American Methodist Episcopal Church was founded. That was over by the old high school there. It's actually very close to the cemetery, and that is the crow flies. And anyhow, and a corner of St. Paul Cemetery was given for use by the African Methodist Americans. So it's a small corner of the cemetery that's all African Americans. And not segregated by race, segregated by religion. It's a Lutheran cemetery and they're Methodists. No. Yeah, so I covered that. And the house goes on, it's the poor part of town. I've talked to a couple of people that lived up in that area. And people, the residents by tradition are just very, very poor. And again, this was the entire community, with the exception of this house, was African Americans, and this was a church house. It was probably given to a lot of people to use over the years. It was actually a private residence right through the 19, I think, till 1960. And you can see it's interesting. I've seen some postcards of this from like 1905, 1910. People recognize it as the oldest building in the county. There was one picture I was trying to import, and I couldn't get into this, with the clothesline hanging there. And so it's funny, they're throwing the place on postcards, but it's really a rundown wreck lived in by very, very poor people. It was never wired for electricity. When the restoration came, it made it a little easier because nothing had been torn up inside, never had running water, never had pipes, never had wires. It's pretty much pristine. A lot of that plaster is original to 1743. And so it was the poor part of town. On the other hand, it was probably preserved for that reason. It just stayed there. Nobody knocked it down for a business. It was out of the way. And a similar house was over by the old stone fort. This is a crying shame, and this woke a lot of people up. There was another house identical to it that was probably about the same age, was over across from Swartz Tavern, where the power plant is today. That was burned down by the fire department for practice. That place existed. There's in the history books, the Indians and the Tories tried to burn it repeatedly, and the sharpshooters in the tower of the old stone fort kept them away. There's one story where a guy with a torch was bound and determined to burn that house. He got behind a big apple tree. 4 of them fired simultaneously. All 4 hit the tree, and the guy threw down the torch and gave it up. That house existed because of that, and it was documented, only to be burned down by the fire department in the 1960s. It's a sin. And it woke a lot of people up. They said that must never happen again. And Schoharie County or Schoharie Colonial Heritage Association was formed with that in mind, that you don't do this again. And so there it is. So New York State, as I said, we don't have the records on what the state did because we lost them in the 2011 flood. I'm hoping the state has something in there. Again, I'm wondering why the door was moved. They put it back. I think what they did, I've been told they were studying Hudson Valley early Dutch houses, and they leaned towards that, the medieval German, when they did the restoration, and they may have taken some liberties. But for the most part, it's original. The center hall stairs that had been put in or have been moved. They're back to the old stairs, which are hardly more than a ladder, and so on. You can see the roof here too is a little rough shape. This picture was taken a year ago, I think. And that roof was put on in 1972. Those cedar shingles, they were getting a little rough, but it wasn't leaking. I stood in there during a thunderstorm one day when the rain was coming in buckets, and not a drop of rain came through that cedar. That's a cedar, nothing underneath it. You know, you could look up from upstairs and see it. So it's a good roof, a good style. So you can see the kids playing in that. And yeah, we're trying to, bring it back to living history and try to make the place feel like it did back then. I recently did inventory. I'm trying to get rid of some of the furniture is just not appropriate for the 1700s. And doing that and bringing it back around and trying to make it look like it did in the 1700s. Many of you will recognize Alan Cross. Alan's picture winds up in everything. So I thought I would throw him in here. And again, the second floor too, it's surprising when you go upstairs, how many people, how big it is. It looks like a tiny little cottage when you go, when you look at it from the outside. It's actually a pretty good size house. It's 35 by 22, and which is almost a center hall. That's a small center hall, colonial size. But anyhow, family of 10 lived comfortably there. So I'm trying to bring that back and make it look like this last year at Christmas, I had fun. I put toys on every one of the beds. So I kind of designated whose bed was each one, 2 kids to a bed generally. And I'm going to try to bring it back to that. So you know that, there's a family living there. And of course, Christmas is great because the Germans celebrated Christmas when the English didn't. And so we make a big deal of the holiday. The Germans gave us the Christmas tree. And God bless Nick Jurian. I was really sweating bullets over that roof. The estimates came in, the price wound up being more than double than what the estimates were. Nick Jury had wrote the bill. I think it was $39,000. Wrote the check, and anyhow, we just put a new the good red cedar shingles. That's done right. No tar paper underneath it. You never put tar paper under a cedar shingle roof, or it'll be gone in 5 years. They did everything right, and so this should last another 50 years. I don't have to worry about it anymore. So. And again, the thing is, it's not just historic, it really is scenic up there. It's a beautiful place. I'm told it's traditional for the graduating class of Schoharie to have pictures taken up there, wedding photos, wedding parties. I'll come in to unlock the house and see a wedding party there posing for pictures. They just wander in and that. So it really is a pretty sight, and very close to LaSalle Park. And that's it.
Well, if you have questions for Ted, please go on to the chat and type them in. And we have some up there already. So
Okay.
let me see what we got. One of the natives was Mohican.
Yes. Yeah, actually, boy, I could go a longer time on this story. The village in Schoharie was probably founded in 1692 to 1693. The French and the Hurons destroyed everything Mohawk in that year, burned all the Mohawk villages, took all their wives and children prisoner pretty much. They had to negotiate to get them back. It was a big deal. At that point, they moved everything south of the Mohawk. And they had a Huron prisoner, apparently, who married a Mohawk woman, and there were bound to be hard feelings. This fellow's new father-in-law, as the story is told, again, it could just be folklore, but it's pretty much accepted, that he realized sooner or later the young men in his community were going to get drunk and kill this guy, even though he'd been adopted into the tribe. So he set up a new village for his daughter-in-law in the Schoharie Valley. And that's actually that land, they've got sites going back to 8,000 years in that valley. So it periodically been settled. It was already cleared. They'd settle there for a while, leave, and then come back again. And so we set her up, and it's a mixed community, since that it's not full Mohawk, in which case, yeah, you have a lot of Delawares in there, you have Mohicans in there, you might have Scatticokes, people come and go, and so it's kind of an open community. Sometimes they'll winter there and then leave in the spring, and so yeah, there were definitely Mohicans there. So
Okay. Let's see.
That must be down by Barbers.
I'm glad to have come in at the last few minutes. Drums along the Mohican band
a Mohawk band, yeah,
or Mohawk.
yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, great book. I wish they would redo the movie. Henry Fonda was in the first one. I hate it because the Indians were using bows and arrows constantly when they would have used rifles, but it was the 1930s and it was a Hollywood set. All the trees were evergreens. But anyhow, I'm glad he's a fan.
Is there a surviving cemetery for the early settlers?
Yes. The Lutheran cemetery, the oldest burial in there is I think the oldest stone is 1778, the existing stone. They go back earlier than that. And that's all in German. It's a little 4-year-old girl, I think. Over in the Middleburg Reformed Church, over the years, the cemeteries have been destroyed by floods and that. But if you go in the back, they have the stones that have all been turned into the church are on the wall mounted. And they're actually, it's a cemetery, but it's mounted on the wall in the church. And also Middleburg Cemetery. Many of these, they were crude stones, they were field stones. The sandstones, actually, the early ones, the good ones are sandstone. They hold up better than marble generally, unless they fracture. But there are some. The Lutheran Cemetery, people come to visit the Palatine House. They'll say 15 or 20 minutes. They walk in the cemetery and they're there an hour. And so, yeah, there's a lot of great graves in that cemetery.
So Carla Jean's, what's that?
How did his journals?
Oh, I'm sorry.
How did his journals end up with the Mormons?
I don't know. It just blew my mind that the Mormon, 24 years of Peter Nicholas Sommer. Yeah, and it's on microfilm. All I guess came across that site. And of course, I was doing this and I was almost out of time. And I went, oh my God. And
What, like 2 days ago? you came up with
yeah,
it.
and it says it's the Mormons have it on microfilm. Who knew?
I'll definitely follow up on.
Yeah,
Well, the
so,
Mormons did a lot of ancestry, and that's where a lot of people.
yeah, apparently so, but who knew? It would have been, see what happened too, is a Lutheran church. And then in 1960, it becomes, they combined, I think it was the Lutherans and the Methodists combined, and not to hurt anybody's feelings, they became Presbyterian because none of them was a Presbyterian. And the man walking through the process was a Presbyterian. And so they became Presbyterian. And then I think a lot of their records at that point might have gone out. I don't know who has them. If they kept the Lutheran Church records, if they went to the Old Stone Fort, if they went to the Mormons. At the same time, the Lutheran Church owns the Lutheran Parsonage. At that time, it goes to the town of Schoharie. I don't know if that's a part of that process or what, but so anyway, it just blew my mind. I will definitely be on this.
So
So
you're talking about the present Presbyterian church? in
yes,
Schoharie.
yes,
That was built as a Lutheran church.
yes. That was the Lutheran Church till 1960. And then they became Presbyterians. So,
So Carla Jean said her great grandmother was a Sommer.
okay.
And Bonnie Daly said, where did you find the records of the 84 Indians who were baptized by Reverend Summers?
Those are, I know, I just have it jotted down that in the notes that I took when I took over the museum, we have a certain amount of things that we had down. And I think that all came from the Lutheran Church records, which are, again, they're in existence someplace. I just do not have them at this time.
Zion Church in Cobleskill did a lot of history.
Yeah.
When they had their, well,
Right.
100-year anniversary
Yeah.
and so on. And they have it in their records. which
Yeah.
they probably-
Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I remember, and I just went online. No, I did go St. Paul's Lutheran Church. I Googled it and I came on a page of baptisms and you scroll down and it says this person's an Indian, this person's an Indian. And that's right. So if you Google St. Paul's Lutheran Church, Schoharie, it's there. So,
That's what Vic said. He sent it to Bonnie, a list of the natives who were baptized
There
in
you
St.
go.
Paul.
Okay.
So thank
and
you.
again,
Vic.
this is a new program and I'm still putting
Yeah.
it together. And again, I'm just finding things out as I go.
20 years ago, there was a bad photocopy of Rufus Grider
Yeah.
drawing of the house pinned to the wall near the stairs. Is the original part of the house collection or in a scrapbook in New
Well,
York?
I'm glad you brought that up. Rufus Grider is my hero. I could do a whole program on Rufus Grider. And I really tried to get, I have that photograph. Now it's mounted on foam board over at the Palatine House and I forgot to take a picture of it. And I wanted to go back. I spent an hour online looking for Rufus Grider's picture of the Palatine House. But what it is, Rufus Grider has the only drawing of the Palatine House with 2 chimneys. And he would not have seen that second chimney because in the front, the Frontiersman, I think it is. There's Jefferson's second book. There's a picture of the parsonage done in about 1880. It's an etching 1 chimney. The people who did the book did a sketch and put it right in the book, 1880. Rufus Grider did the drawing at the same time, 2 chimneys. But Grider didn't do things as he saw them. He did drawings as people told them they used to be. He did the only known drawing of the old stone fort with the stockade around it. Was done 100 years after they took the walls down by Rufus Grider, who talked to people whose grandparents had told them where the walls were, where the black, and so on. So when he did the Rufus Grider did that drawing, the Palatine House, he never saw the second chimney, but it's in the drawing, and that was important to me doing research on the house. So I'm aware of the Rufus Grider drawing. I'm trying to get a better copy of it. So
If the chimney flue went straight up the hearth, how the heck did they ever get any heat from fire? It must have been a wood hog.
yeah, wood hog, yeah, totally. Pretty much, yeah. I mean, no fireplace is efficient. The English ones are certainly more so. And most of the heat probably would have gone up. However, it's an enormous brick chimney. And the bricks heat up. We use those fireplaces periodically. I've gone upstairs and put my hand on the bricks, and those bricks heat up. And so you are getting additional heat, probably warmer upstairs than it was downstairs. You got so much heat loss from the first floor going to the second floor where it's being drawn out, plus the chimney. It probably was pretty comfortable up there, but yeah. And again, totally inefficient as far as heat on the first floor, and no bread oven. The English fireplaces were definitely better.
Okay, well, great. Thank you so much, Ted. We really appreciate you coming today. And let's see, is there any more? Wait, yes, until the Rumsford design fireplaces were basically a fire on the
Okay,
floor of the house with a
a whole
hole
other.
in the roof.
As a matter of fact, the Mohawks in Schoharie by 1750, their village, pretty much no longhouses. They were all built. They had a lot of money, or about the 1750s, 1760s. Sir William Johnson had taken good care of them. Most of their houses were built by English carpenters. They even had windows imported from England or from Europe. And but they said they stuck to the dirt floors, and rather than a chimney, they just put the smoke hole up through. And so anyhow, it's kind of a same idea.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, thank you all for watching tonight. Excuse me, our next program is quilts used as signals for the Underground Railroad. That is on February 27th. And then we have a program on Schoharie County murders and funky stuff. And then on the March 27th, we have Eleanor Roosevelt, the First Lady and First Lady and Humanitarian. So that's the programs that are coming up. Always remember that the first program of the month is both live and Zoom, and the last program on the month is usually the second and fourth, and the fourth is always Zoom only. So thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you for joining us online, and thank you, Ted, for giving such a great presentation.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right.
Oh, thanks.
I think he did get his eyesight back at the end.
I meant to mention